Hey, Norcal Karters. It is September 11th, 2023. And we have a new feature that we're going to be doing once a month. I quickly named it Off the Track, meaning it's just topics that relate to karting or racing in general, but it's off the top. It's off the track stuff. It's not race event promotion, etc. So you'll start seeing some schedules coming out with some other guests in the future. But in a moment, we'll be joined by Joe Janowski from NKA. And we're going to talk about pretty much everything insurance. And then Joe has a very extensive background in karting. So I'm pretty sure with the way I ask questions, we're going to be talking about butterflies and squirrels and everything else. But Joe will join us in a minute. But first, we'll have Ashley to come on to do some little housekeeping stuff. Ashley?
Hey NorCal, what's up? It's the Norcal Karters chick. All right, so over the weekend, if you were paying attention, we had a stacked NorCal field at Spud Cup. We are very proud of all of our racers, especially Steven Iser, who brought home the win for NorCal. Congratulations, Steven. We're all very proud of you. Okay. Also, we have 154 spots left to subscribe onto our YouTube so that we can hit 1,000 subscribers. Let's do it. I hope we could do it soon because we're so close and I can't stand it. All right. So next up, we have our t-shirts. T-shirts are still on sale. We're trying to get the second run going with different designs and stuff. So t-shirts still on sale. Link is in our on our social media, Facebook and Instagram. And I'm going to send it back to Jason. Oh, don't forget to register for Corning and Rockfest. Corning and Rockfest are both this weekend. Register. Okay. Here we go.
There you go. All right. So, Corning, temporary track. If you're prepping for one of the Vegas races and you're not running Rockfest West, you should probably be running Corning. So, good job by Ashley to get those in there. Those are both happening this week. And both series have been pushing a lot over social media about both of those events. Norcal Karters, we will be. Ashley, head nod. Are you going to be in Corning? So Ashley will be in Corning. Jason, this guy will be at Sonoma for the Rockfest West. So stay tuned to our social media channels for different updates and things like that. So without further ado, let's bring on Joe Janowski. Joe, how are you?
What's up, guys?
How are you?
All of a sudden, I was like right, front and center there, man. I was like, ooh, scared myself.
So, for those that don't know who you are, give us a quick background on your kart racing experience and the 900 different businesses that you have your hands in.
Yeah, that's actually pretty tough to do. Started racing karts when I was 8, and I'm 50, so that's a really long time. Did that. So I'm based in Indiana. So I started racing around here. Eventually made my way up through, was kind of on that early cusp of that first big run, like kind of when, I was one of the big regional guys, probably from the Midwest, especially when the shifter karting stuff started to take off. Although I ran enduros, I ran dirt karts, and I ran, a lot of different things, the KT100s and controls and opens. And ended up, kind of finding it. My dad and I went to a street race once, and shifter karts were there, and we were like, "Holy balls! That is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life." So that was, I think, in '92, and so we really got kind of heavy into that. And that was sort of my family started SCUSA, and so that was kind of big here. It was like a regional program until it sort of went national, kind of in '97, '98. So I was one of the I don't know, top 10, top 15, top 20. I was there at all, the big races and stuff like that, and had a great time and raced for a long time. In 2006, I kind of hung that up a little bit and I ran super late models, dirt late models, it's modified. So I've done the Chili Bowl a couple of times. So, I'm really probably primarily, I'm a racer, um, kind of to the core. And everything else that we've done as a family has sort of been just kind of a natural offshoot of that. So the NKA is it's been the quiet giant in the sport for a really long time. My dad started it in 1985, and I joined it in 1995 when I graduated from college. And I've been running it solely since the mid 2000s. And we do, and it always changes, but there's 250 to 300 facilities that utilize some aspect of our sanctioning program along the way. That's a good picture of my mom and dad right there.
It's
So,
your website.
yeah. And so my dad passed away in 2016. My mom's still around, but she's kind of like, the mother of modern shifter kart racing is kind of what one of the guys that works for me likes to call her. So, but yeah, if you were big racing back in the 90s and early 2000s, you would have seen those two certainly at tracks, but probably predominantly East Coast stuff, except for the Super Nats, kind of when we got that going. So NKA does a lot of things. It does rules and regulations. It's a sanctioning organization. So probably the big thing. Hey, that's me driving a 206, by the way.
Right there with the purple helmet.
Yeah, that's me. It's actually a tribute helmet I did for my dad, and
Okay.
it's kind of a neat. I did that one not too long after he passed away, so it was kind of cool. So that's G&J Kartway in one of the early tracks here in the Midwest. And so we do a lot of the things that go involved, but one of the big ones is going to be insurance, because it's a necessity of the sport. The sport really can't operate without it. And so that is, for any sanctioning organization, that's going to be a pretty big part of what's involved in the maintenance of that type of a program and things like that. So that's NKA. A couple years ago, I just really got that bug to be back in the promotion production end of things. I'm kind of I don't know if you know the term polymath or not, but I think when it comes to like racing, I'm sort of a polymath. I like to be involved. I like to learn about all of these different things. I'm interested in all different aspects of it. Race promotion is just one of those things I've always enjoyed. And back in the SCUSA days, I was racing. So, what I did for SCUSA was all in the back end. I wrote the rule book for years. I don't think I was terribly great at it, but did it for a long time, and a bunch of little stuff here and there. And so really kind of got that itch again. So I started a program called Stars Championship Series. We actually started with it as an esports deal that we did during the pandemic. So that was kind of fun. I kind of morphed it into, more of a karting operation. But now we're actually going to be teaming up with some people to sort of relaunch an esports program, which I still do. So I still race online. And then finally, I think the last one, Jesus, there's a lot of them, it seems like. The last one is Track Systems, and Track Systems is a place where we do some really neat stuff. Doing NK and doing Stars, I was really, probably I've been solving a lot of my own problems. So light systems for karting tracks were super expensive, and I found a really high quality, high fidelity unit. It's all radio frequency, portable, and we do that. So I started doing that with Stars, and we have graphic boards, and we have CIK start lights and all this stuff, and it's all really cool. And so I actually started importing those in the States because I thought these are neat and people should have these. There's a sort of what I call a facility and event management software system that we're going to be finally uploading into the Track Systems system here fairly soon, as well as a video system I'm calling Overwatch. So we've been developing a lot of components there. So it's a very specific software that merges with certain types of video systems that should be reasonably affordable and easy for a lot of tracks to use. So I like to, my mantra is I like doing cool shit. And so that I hope we can say that. I hope there's no kids watching.
We have like 4 people watching, so you're clear.
There's only 4. Well, hey,
yeah.
Welcome 4.
4.
So anyway, so that's what we do, is all that kind of fun stuff.
Very cool.
Well, you plugged it wrong, Jason. You should have said we were going to talk about something really interesting and then dupe them in with karting
With
insurance
insurance?
related stuff, right?
That sounds like an old Amway sales pitch. Hey, come on over
It
for
is.
dinner, and
Yeah.
then you bring out the
I'll feed you a
whiteboard.
steak, and oh, by the way, yeah,
This shampoo will last you for 6 years.
exactly.
All right, so I have a question. Why are wristbands important?
Well, that's a really broad question. It is so. So I'm going to have to infer something, and so the actual wristband that you put on your arm, it is not that important. So all the wristband is doing is saying is an indicator that you've signed the waiver and are now eligible to get into the pit area. And that's all that's really doing on a day-to-day basis, right? So there's nothing inherently important with the wristband. It's what's behind the wristband that's important. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, so what that signifies is that signature that you sign, that's the public facing part of the number one thing that it takes our sport to keep going. And that's insurance, liability insurance. If we don't have it, then the sport doesn't exist. So it would, I'm not going to say it's not going to completely exist, but it's going to be on people's private property. It's going to be really Wild West kind of stuff. So it is the most important thing. So, so I mean, the wristband's not really that important, but what it signifies is super, super important.
And then
that was actually a good question to start with.
What kind of coverage do you get when you sit with your signature? Like, what kind of coverage do you get?
Okay, so it depends on who you are. If you are a racer, so I'm assuming that we have a racer popping on here. What do you get? Well, you get mainly access to what's called a participant accident, which is also called an excess medical. What that's in place, it's in place basically in a very similar way for those of you out there that watch it now or are watching in the future. It's kind of like a homeowner's, and your homeowner's has kind of a primary medical that goes with it. So if I come to Jason's house and I trip on his sidewalk and I break my face, and I need to go to the emergency room or something like that, homeowners has a thing that says like, okay, so we're going to pay some real basic injuries here. And the idea of that is to make it so you don't call up the local injury attorney that you see on TV in the morning, and try to keep losses low. So that's really what that's for. So participant accident is pretty similar. Really what it's there for is to assist in in taking care of minor types of injuries. It's not a major medical. You're not actually buying any insurance when you do that. So you're getting access to a program that's in place for a whole bunch of racetracks. And so you don't really get to choose coverage, things like that. And so, and each track, they actually can pick their own amounts, anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000, depending upon what they want, what market they're in, all sorts of other things. Obviously, the price is changed there. If you're a track owner, what you're buying is the liability insurance. And that's really the core of what the insurance programs are. It's liability insurance. And that's to protect not just the promoter, but really anyone that's involved in the production of the event. They're involved in the event in some way. So common would be like a landowner, a major sponsor, track workers, anything that's involved in the production of the event. So the liability insurance is in place in case something happens and they get sued. And that's and so really probably the important ones there are the landowners. Those are the ones that really kind of force the hand to make sure, especially out west. Like there's a ton of tracks out west that are municipal. Not all of them, but a ton of them. So like on airport property, or they're going to be on park property, or some sort of public property. The state or the county or the airport authority, whatever it is, they mandate that. And if you can't bring it, then they're not going to open up the door. So that's kind of what's being purchased. It gets confusing. So I'll go ahead for the 4 people. I'll explain this.
No, Two things are. Since you started talking, it's jumped to 10. So
Oh
Yeah.
crap!
And we have a question too.
All right. Well, I'll hold off. We'll get back to the incestuous nature of pit passes and insurance. But what's the next? What's the next question firing off?
All right. So, our friend Gear Nuts asks, what does the insurance picture look like when you have a race on city streets like they did in Modesto, which also did have a lot of hospital visits?
Dude,
Was that a dude? Was that a?
you had to bring up Modesto, and I still it's one of the only events ever that looked really good.
Yeah.
It was like one of those, and a lot goes into street races. I mean, it's not kind of like, hey, let's throw up some crap and go run a street race. I mean, to be fair, those guys put a lot of work into that program, and I put a lot of work into that program, and you do certain things, but sometimes the way things are, and being a racer, I can tell you this: sometimes things don't race the way you think they're going to race. The corner you think is going to be terrible, hideous mess with all kinds of mangled go-karts, it's fine. And then the one area that looks fine, it's terrible. I wasn't at Modesto, so I can't tell you, but it's it's one of the only times that I've ever I was getting phone calls, from people, and some of them were there, and some were like, hey dude, I'm hearing some really wild, stuff's going on out there, and I'm trying to reach the guys out there, and I'm not getting anything back. And sometimes, that race is on,
Yeah.
and you're just gonna, do this. There wasn't any litigation that came out of it, and so I know that there were some injury claims, some medical claims that did come out of it. You know, our system kind of accounts for it. We know a certain amount of people are going to get hurt, and so it's something you don't like. I did. Obviously you don't like what was happening in Modesto, and I don't think anybody did. But yeah, I still have Modesto PTSD. To be honest with you. I saw Modesto pop up on the screen. I'm like, oh man.
So Gear Nuts, he's from Modesto, so he'll clarify how long he's been in the sport, but
if you want to, but take a step back, because this question was actually, what does that insurance picture look like? And it's extremely involved, and it is also, unfortunately, just about dead as a doornail. And just to give a preface to that, in the insurance world, karting is not looked upon favorably, and it used to be. There was a time where there was numerous carriers that were interested in covering karting events, and now we have two. And that's really an uncomfortable position for our sport to be in, and especially when you work as hard as you can to try and make sure things are good. And the thing is, and I want everybody to understand out there, it's not all competition karting. As a matter of fact, it's only a fraction of that impact is competition karting. The problem is that the insurance industry as a whole just says karting, and they don't break it apart. So there's differences, big differences between dirt karting and sprint karting. But there's even bigger differences between indoor karting or outdoor recreational karting and competition karting. And I'm working a lot on the backside. So a lot of conversations I have within the insurance industry, I'm working on launching a training program for carriers to better understand differences in different types of karting, and making sure that the right things are happening and things are being applied correctly. But there's no question, it's under attack. So when you look at things like street racing, and in any temporary circuit to a certain extent, but street racing in particular, the carriers just don't want it anymore.
Yeah.
You have it, and it's not really the risk to the driver, because we're crazy. So, I grew up street racing. So I was, man, I pretty much every weekend, that's what I was doing, more or less. And so we're crazy, and I hit trees a few times, and curbs, and you go flying. And I had a buddy that ended up on top of somebody's house once, and I've got tons of stories like that. But that was a different time period. Today,
someone cut his feet off.
All right. Well, we're
he's
gonna
talking
get
about
Joe
his
back
buddy.
on, hopefully.
He's talking about his buddy ending up on a roof. I bet you the chief underwriter pulled the plug on that one.
All right. The network pulled the plug on Joe. So we will be back. Let's talk about, okay, so we got Corning coming up. We got Rockfest coming up. There's going to be a night race in Prairie City. That's going to be awesome. Donald got the lights. So if you're not going to see KNA, come to Prairie City because we're having a party. And we're doing it at night. Also, oh, all right, here we go.
I'm back.
You're
Here
back.
we go.
Dude, I don't know what happened there.
We
Look,
don't
folks, Jason and Ashley send out this thing. It's 87 pages about the things you need to know about being on the show.
That's right.
And like the very top is you really need a strong internet connection. I mean, I'm in my house and I have no idea what happened. So sorry about that. Hey, if it happens again, I'll just log back in.
It was good because it wasn't even pixelated. You just dropped.
I just
Gone.
Yeah. What was I talking about?
You're talking about your buddy ending up on the roof of a house.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Then
Yeah,
someone
that's a
pulled the
wild story.
plug.
Yeah, his name was Tony Parker, and that was crazy. Anyway, so the point is that it's not really what happens to the people that are racing. I mean, obviously you want to make sure that they're protected too, but really it's the exposure to the general public, and which is really hard for people to like get their hands around because as a sport, we always try to promote our sport. You know, it's like, hey, street racing, it's great for people to see it, and we might get some interested people interested in karting, and maybe they go to a track and check it out or something like that. And so it sucks, honestly, it really does. But I think it's sort of it's kind of a fatality of the times, right? Like, if 20 years ago, if a kart had kind of gotten into a group of people or something like that, and there were some minor injuries, nothing really wouldn't be that big of a deal. Today, that could be a $500,000 loss or more, right? And karting, that's huge for karting as a sport, for what it pays in. So, it's just the risk of it, and so that's where the street races have gone. So I think we basically got to, I got to a point where I could do two, and I had to fight hard to do two. And so they're both based. One of them ran actually the weekend before Rock Island Grand Prix, so kind of a storied street race event. And then there's a smaller one in Indiana, Anderson Mayor's Cup, and it's sort of local to me. And I'm really good friends with the guy that promotes it. He's kind of like been a second dad to me in racing. His name is Terry Riggins, and I'm sure most of you have no idea who that is.
I know,
or maybe you do. Yeah. So anyway, Terry's involved in actually both of those events. So he was kind of critical to making sure that both of those were able to happen correctly. And but they had race. It was great. Both of them ran very well this year. They made a lot of changes and a lot of adjustments. And because I came in like the big bad wolf, and I'm like, man, I need this, and I need we have to go so far beyond what we even think is reasonable and normal. So that's what street racing looks like, because I get tons of calls a year. So many. And it's like, hey, I'm from I get calls from cities that want to do it. And it's like, hey, I'm from such and such city, or, we're putting together a group, and there used to be a race in this other town, and we're looking at kind of doing something the same. And I, for the first time in my life, I'm having to tell somebody, I can't really do much.
So we do have a question coming in. I think this is Andres. Let's see here.
Oh, yeah.
What would the top 3 things the club level karter and parents could do that help their track remain in good standing with their insurance?
All right, these are good questions. Are you guys feeding these folks? Because that's a pretty good question to ask.
But Andres he's been part of one of our local clubs.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I want to spin it both ways. I want you to answer that question, but then also from a trackside perspective too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so as you're participating, right, as you're moving through the pits, you're getting a different view than the officials or a track owner is going to get. It's stuff in the pits, like, people who are just getting stupid and silly, right? Like one of the next things coming down the pike is, and if it's not done next year, I can almost guarantee probably 2025, but bikes and scooters,
Yes.
right?
Oh,
So when
yes.
you see bikes and scooters and kids acting stupid, put the scooter away, right? So that's probably the. I'll be honest with you, and what's really interesting is I haven't seen a huge uptick in litigation on the bikes and the scooters. Um, what I am seeing is an increase. So what I mean by litigation is it's gotten to the point where things are beginning to proceed, right? So that really hasn't happened, but I am seeing a lot of attorneys love to send you letters, right? So, Jason, you're riding your bike and I'm walking along and you cream me, right?
Yep.
And to date, nothing's really happening with that. But what we are getting is I call up my local attorney and I'm like, hey, local attorney, I got hit by a bike. And so we're getting those, what I call feeler letters, and we're pretty aggressive in defending those kinds of things. But yeah, the bikes, I mean, as a sport, just y'all kind of get ready because there's already programs that are beginning to ban it. I'm like with stars, I'm still on the fence, mostly because it's tough to chase everybody down,
Yeah.
honestly. So it has to be completely. Then you have to okay, there are some people that need to be on, right? So you have handicap stuff you have to work with. So it's kind of like, well, how do we manage those things? So I can just see it coming. So that's one. So basically doing that stuff. So just really stupid rough housing in pits, because that's a dumb way to get lost. The second one, honestly, is just to have a second view of the facility. If fences, wobbly or, I mean, it's super, I can't tell you how critical it is we keep go-karts out of where people are standing. It is the number one thing that's more critical than anything else that we do, is when a go-kart impacts somebody, whether they're signed in and they're a racer or they're somebody's mom or grandma or a friend, if they get hit, then our chance of going to litigation, or even not even going to litigation, nowadays everyone wants to settle everything. So our chance of a really big settlement is a big deal. Plus, as a sport, we've kind of failed them, right? Like, we want you to come into our facility and we want you to enjoy it. So, if you're seeing problems with fencing, if there's obvious barrier issues, then, and these things happen, and they happen sometimes because somebody meant to do that. They meant to move the barrier, but they kind of forgot about it.
What about pets?
I saw somebody's dog run on the racetrack and get smoked about 25 years ago. And that was traumatic. I mean, just generally speaking. Other than that, dogs should be on a leash. I mean, anytime you're in a public space, because then you're exposing risk. And actually, when it comes to dogs and when it comes to you and your dog biting someone else, you're personally liable for that. So, that's the other thing that's probably really important, is that you do not abdicate your personal responsibility and liability for things that you do just because you happen to be at a racetrack, right? So one of the things with the bikes and the go-peds and stuff around the track, I really think there's probably going to be a case that pops up, and it's going to get basically kicked over to the parents' personal liability, either their homeowners or probably their auto. Because really what they need to do is they need to find the money. And so we come back and say, hey, look, it's a bike. I mean, it is what it is. And they're like, you're right. So we're going to go after the parents individually of that kid. You can begin to see those things, that's a huge risk. The other thing is just, honestly, just safety related items. Man, if you see somebody's weight's about ready to fall off, let them know. We had a dude that he was on the track and came off, right? So he comes off and walks up, he stands next to his dad. Right at that moment, a weight came off a cart, got hit, and hit him right here at, I don't know, probably 40 bajillion miles an hour. And so those things, all of those things, all those little pieces, everybody doing their little bit of part is super important.
At Davis years ago, I saw a cart hit a 5-pound weight on the track, and it smoked the front axle of the cart. Like, done.
Yeah.
and it was only a 5-pound weight. And after I saw that, it really opened my eyes to just the mass or the impact. I mean, the cart was smoked from a 5-pound weight just sitting on the track.
Yeah. That's another big problem. I'll tell you what, when that incident happened, sometimes it's kind of like the sport doesn't do things, and this is any sport, by the way, this isn't karting. I mean, Dale Earnhardt had to pass away before they, came up with Hans device. And that was after 4 guys died just before him of the same thing. So sometimes it just takes something to sort of push people and go, no, like this is maybe more of a problem than what we're all sitting around talking about. And so, this year I made a pretty big thing within the NKA, and there has to be, double nutting and, big fender washers and things on weight that's bolted onto carts. And, initially you get a lot of pushback on that. And it's like, man, it takes literally another minute, to
Yeah.
get this done right. And so those are the things that I think are super critical and super important. But that's one of them, and so going back to safety, and stuff like that. But yeah, once I started, I remember what my point is. I'm getting older, right? So it's hard to remember what the hell you're talking about. But
Hitting that pace in a street race.
yeah. So I mean, I'm going back to those things where those are the things we need to be paying attention to as a sport. That's what we have to be paying attention to, all the little pieces.
Yeah, it was interesting. A number of years ago when I was working for Swede Tech, I was out at one of the new tracks that SCUSA was going to, and it was a kart track, but SCUSA hadn't been there before, and it was interesting watching Tom do the track walk. And I'm looking at it from a racing standpoint, and he's looking at it from if a cart goes off here and crosses over to this side of the track, and I mean, I kind of assumed he would be doing that, but that was kind of all he was worried about is, okay, how do I keep this cart on this side of the track? And yeah, they ended up bringing in barriers and everything else because there was a hairpin area. And it would have been very easy for the carts just to go to the other side of the track.
Yeah, that's actually probably the most common things that kart tracks really don't do on a regular basis is really just have enough. And barriers are one way to do it. And there's tires and you have hay bale, and there's a lot of ways you can do what I call the cross. It's just a crossover, right? But the crossovers are important. The litigation risk of a crossover is a lot less, right, than a cart crossing over and getting into like a pit area. But yeah, it's just, again, it's at any event you can have 100 or 200 or 300 people, and if everybody's doing it properly, right, and not going like, oh my God, I can't believe you're going to race if there's this little hole in the fence, but let somebody know about it, right, and work on getting those things fixed and work on getting them shored up, and eventually, we're going to have a lot safer sport as we continue on.
Now, what about extending the coverage? So we talked about wristbands. We talked about some of the track coverage. We kind of, jumped across the top of each of those topics. But what about like a race team that shows up to the track? One, does NKA offer anything for those teams? But if not, you and I talked about it last week. I mean, you can speak directly to it because you're an expert in insurance. What should insurance look like for these teams that are bringing customers of the track?
Honestly, for the teams, it's not really that hard. I don't offer anything because that's a much different type of product than what we do, and so I'm like a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche, and that's our focus. But there's a lot of great people out there, and basically, really, it's kind of it's a basic commercial general liability policy. And that's really going to protect them in a lot of different instances, and it will stack if in some way that they were named in a lawsuit, then their CGL would likely come in behind ours. So it could be a double layer of protection. You can never anticipate what's going to happen once stuff gets in the court system, by the way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Well,
so it's always a guess.
A scenario that I was kind of thinking of for this question would be like if somebody came to like test a go-kart, or I'm brand new and I want to try it, and they come out with a team and they get in a go-kart, never done it before, and they go, straight into the barrier in the first turn because they don't know like their brain just doesn't process turning or anything. Like, as a team, could they have is there like such thing as a coverage to kind of protect you in those situations, or is this what you're kind of talking about with the liability type thing?
Yeah. So, generally speaking, one thing with insurance is you can always go down the rabbit holes. Not one rabbit hole, but you can literally go down like 87 million rabbit holes
Yeah.
of what could happen. That's actually been tested in court. And I'm not going to bring up the name because it was a long time ago. But there was a team, they actually put a guy in so this was a series event, right, that my family formerly was part of. And unbeknownst to anybody, this team's running there. It's like a Thursday or Friday practice day for the event, right? And this brand new guy shows up. He's like, "Man, I want to get one of these. Can I hop in one and check it out?" Right? And they literally send the guy out in the middle of a pro moto practice session. He did exactly what you talked about, and this is at Phoenix, by the way. And so he goes out.
Is that the guy that went through the fence?
That's the guy.
That's the guy.
And so he freaks out. I wasn't there for that one, ironically.
He went pretty far through the fence.
He freaks and keeps this thing pinned. He's off the track, goes under a fence, goes under another fence, and hits a truck. I think like it's out in the field somewhere. And so that actually did kind of go through the process, and really that fell underneath the event.
Okay.
Is what absorbed that. So really with teams, what they need to be doing is making sure that there is coverage there that day. And when you show up at a track and you call the track owner, I'm not trying to throw anybody on the bus at all here, by the way. If you're a track owner, don't call
I didn't know this, so
things.
literally, like, I'm asking.
Yeah, so, there may or may not be insurance on a track on a Wednesday. Right. So these are all event related kind of things. And so, if you don't sign anything, if there's not somebody taking the signature from you that day, then you have to question whether there's insurance there or not. If you are in business, then it's probably safe to either, number one, not go, or number two, rent the facility for the day. And through that rental, see if you can acquire kind of a test and tune kind of a program, which we'll do here and there. Things like that. So really the team exposure, to be honest with you, is probably really like a lot less on the event side, and a lot more on they run a dangerous business in a way. So work comp is going to be tough for those guys. They need something that's called inland marine insurance, or some people call over the road insurance. So when you have, $500,000 worth of equipment, and it gets stolen, or there's a fire and everything burns up, that's the insurance that pays for all of that. So really, if they're trying to operate on sort of, and by the way, it's cheap. That's actually not that expensive. So really for most teams, it's a really good idea to have all that stuff. But as long as you're at, if you see NKA on that wristband, you need to feel good about it. So as long as you're at a good event, and it's got a good quality program behind it from a team owner's perspective, you're going to be okay. It gets a little warmier when you're showing up on a Tuesday afternoon. So like I said, the number one thing is if you don't sign something, you need to be skeptical.
You got another one, Ashley?
No, that's how much insurance stuff can we talk about, Jason?
I don't know. You never know what people are going to ask in the comments.
It's true. Did you want to go back to, if we do have a kind of a flatness a little bit, do you want to go back to the discussion that we had last week, the difference between pit passes and insurance?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a big thing. And again, I hope track owners don't get mad at me, for this kind of stuff, but this is maybe one of the topics I want to bring up, because it actually can lead into another area. But because of when this transaction happens, you show up at a race, you sign a piece of paper, or maybe it's electronic now. You do an electronic signature, maybe before you get to the race, and then you pay some money.
Do those still count?
They do. Yeah, we can talk about e-waivers if you want to. Sure.
Okay.
And so what people have done over the years is then that's what that concept of, oh, I'm giving money, I'm signing a signature, and I'm getting a wristband. I must be buying insurance. And so the number one thing is actually going back to one of the first questions that came in. You are not buying insurance as a racer. There's no specific exchange of those kinds of things. What you're getting is access to a program that might be available at that facility. So with that in mind, what you're paying as a pit pass is the same as buying a ticket, right, to an event. And so now a lot of people are going to be like, well, wait a minute, why am I paying 20 or 30 or 15 or whatever it is to get into the place then? And my response is, it is important for our sport and the places that we compete to be able to generate revenue so that they can, number one, pay for their time. And out west, you guys have a lot more clubs still than, in the East Coast, clubs are kind of rare. In the West Coast are a lot more predominant. So you guys do have the ability, you guys are sharing the load between a number of different people, right? But in general, even with clubs, we need to be able to update our facilities and keep them nice, right? For insurance reasons. Like we need to be able to change fencing and update, the scoring tower and update this and, pay people to come out and do certain things. And, well, it's kind of funny looking at myself talking while I'm talking, but anyway.
While you're talking.
That's some esports stuff. But, the profitability of a facility is extremely important. And that's just part of the cost of going to events. And it's one of only two ways that a facilities or an event's going to generate revenue. One's off of, well, for the most part, it's going to be, entry fees, and it's going to be pit passes. And then you have some minor ones. They might have a sponsorship, or, they might, get a tire thing, which, everybody thinks, tracks are making bajillions off of the tire money, but they're not. It's actually pretty small money. And so that's a really important thing. But it is one thing that I wanted to make sure that people understood, about that transaction, that they're not buying insurance. The track is.
All right, we did have a comment. Tow vehicle contents coverage.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I just covered. So we were talking about teams and stuff like that. So yeah, so if you have a vehicle and you're towing stuff, it's not too hard to go out and get coverage. It's called inland marine insurance, and you can find that pretty easy. If you guys through my friends here, if any of you have trouble locating it, I don't do it personally anymore, but I can forward you on to some really good friends of mine that do, and they do it in all 50 states. So, but that is coverage you really do need to have, by the way. And even small teams can have this. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. It's really tough, and some people have probably figured it out. It's really tough to get coverage for your go-kart, right? Yeah. So, like in any way. So really, an inland marine coverage, which is a vehicle contents coverage, kind of, that is what that is, right? It's a great way to cover your engines and your generators and your tools. And usually kind of you'll go through and you'll itemize out what it is that you have, and then they'll, write your policy for it. And it's usually not too terrible. $1,000 a year, maybe $1,500 a year. Usually it's only like minimum premium.
Great. Track storage.
At track storage, same thing. If it's basically what it's doing is that coverage, that inland marine coverage, is sort of following your stuff. So when it's at your shop, it's there. When you're on the road traveling or at the racetrack, when it's over here in a storage unit at the track or something like that, it's the same thing that's doing it.
All right, what about this one?
The hell's that?
IKF insurance tag from 1996.
Jesus, that's old.
Well, just in case I get hurt.
That's a fossil.
Yeah. Why would you even have that?
No.
That is old, dude.
No.
Yeah, so that used to be
I have
something.
no idea.
Yeah, I think IKF and WK gave those out like it was sort of like a receipt,
Yes,
for what you did.
that was my
And
wristband number or
yeah, no,
receipt number.
yeah,
It was my old
it-
track box. I had these, and then they used to give out these little metal plaques, like your
right.
participation sign in plaque for the bigger races. And yeah, this was just stuck in there on one of the lips. It's like, oh,
That's funny. Yeah, that was a big deal. IKF and WK did that for a long time, and I'm sure they had a good reason for it back then. That would have been, you said that was from 1996.
96. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean there really wasn't a good reason to do it, but we weren't doing it. But you know, so be it.
To track it, I guess.
It's more than likely a way to track it,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what the wristband numbers are too. Like when you guys are writing down wristband numbers, it's a tracking mechanism. Make sure everything's being reported correctly and things like that. So it doesn't really connotate much of anything specific. And actually, we mentioned it before. We might as well talk about e-waivers. So, when you guys go in and sign stuff, and it's become like 10 years ago, you couldn't get an e-waiver for motorsports. I mean,
Yeah.
the industry didn't want to do it, and I hounded them, but a lot of other people hounded them too, right? And so finally, and really what they would come back with, there's a thing called case law. And case law is, for those of you that don't know, case law is just when cases go through the court system and judges start making decisions. And they really didn't have enough in terms of waivers in general, or even like electronic consent, right? Was literally writing your name on your computer screen, was that the same as writing it with a pen on a piece of paper? And then there's a lot of things like, what if we lose it? Right? I mean, the chance of losing a piece of paper, I mean, yeah, you can, but once it's being maintained, like, by the way, we maintain waivers for like 15 years. So I have a warehouse of waivers, right? Just full of paper. So I'm a big e-waiver fan, because then I can store them indefinitely on the size of a laptop, right? But it finally started coming around a few years ago, and it's slow. It's still a little clunky in how, so it was like nothing was happening with waivers, and I was getting really frustrated. And then it was like all of a sudden the floodgates opened. Especially, really, the floodgates, like a lot of things, were COVID related, and that's when basically companies were like, okay, we need people to not be standing in line at a racetrack, any racetrack,
Yeah.
not just karting,
Yeah.
right? So we want people to space. And so from my end, man, that really sucked. Like, it was really good, but it sucked because all of a sudden I've got all of these different software platforms that we're trying to, like, so, okay, so how do I get, used to be pretty simple, right? If you own a racetrack, you have your race, and when you're done with the race, you count up the, stuff, and you sort of mail it in to us, and we document it, and so now you have, the e-waiver stuff with it coming in from everywhere. But that's finally gotten a little bit smoothed out, and we're launching an e-waiver platform ourselves next year to just kind of make it's a little smoother, a little easier, kind of built more for NK tracks. I mean, any track in theory could use it, but it's kind of built for that. So, yay technology, finally.
Now, are you doing
So
any
Will
insurance?
it be able to integrate with like Kart Pass or Motorsports Reg and all that stuff?
no, because they have their own, and that's one of the challenges, right? It's a challenge of who owns the data. Now, technically, I need to be able to get, if there's litigation from a racetrack and they're using, let's say, speed waiver, whatever you want to call it, I need immediate access to that waiver. Immediate access. Actually, I need immediate access to any waiver that's signed, if I have a reason to want to take a look at it. And in those programs, that's difficult. It's difficult to do. It's not meant to function the way that sort of sanctioning organizations have to. So will it integrate? Yeah, I mean, probably. It would sort of replace CartPass. No, because he actually built the waiver process first and then the registration process on top of it, right? So that's really a core piece. And by the way, that's a really cool program.
Yeah.
So Frank did a really cool job with that. When you talk about all the other ones, they can separate out the registration part from the waiver part, and so there might be ways to integrate that. But this is going to be a possible solution. We're still going to be able to take them from other places, but we kind of have to regulate how that works, and sometimes they don't like that either. So, we'll see how it goes. But it's a little cumbersome, for sure. But I can tell you that they're legitimate. So there isn't any real issue in terms of e-waivers at this point. They've been moving through the system now, and it's no major deal.
Okay.
Anything to speed up the registration line.
Anything to speed up a registration line.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially with kids and parental consent forms. That's what chokes them down, by the way. And the main reason is because a kid cannot waive their own rights. And not only that, but and this is something a lot of people don't know. Hey, it's good we brought this up. Here's another, little tidbit, people can learn. The only person that can waive a kid's rights, if the state even deems that's even possible, and some states are now questioning that, right, which is going to be problematic for sports like racing. But the only people that can do it are parents or legal guardians. So a parent is your mom and your dad, biological, right? Anybody else is a legal guardian. That means they have court-appointed authority over you in some way. So if you've adopted somebody, that would be if you've been awarded, sometimes grandparents are awarded legal guardianship of kids or uncles or things like that. But if grandma and grandpa just pick you up and take you to the go-kart track, they cannot sign you in. They do not have the legal right to waive a child's rights. So that's why the parental consent form is challenging, right, but necessary. And it's also because the duration of time that a kid can come back on an incident. So it's much longer than an adult.
So as a mechanic, I shouldn't find my kid in.
Is that why the notarized form was required?
Yeah. Yeah. And then again, COVID, a lot of the notary stuff dropped off because, but that'll probably begin the process of coming back. Yeah, you absolutely should be watching California legislation when it comes to that. Florida's another one. New York is another one. Florida, I mean, there was a time period there about 5 years ago, maybe not even 5. I was worried about go-kart racing in Florida, period. And I'm not quite as up to where California legislation is, but California, from a liability insurance kind of a state, it's scary. There's companies leaving California.
A bunch of home insurance just pulled out this year.
Yeah, in kind of a lot of aspects, right? Not really just racing. It's just that environment is just sort of where people are like, we don't think we want to be in California. And what that means is somebody will be there, but it's just going to be a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
So, definitely keep a look at that.
Can we close again with, or not close, but can we go back to this again before we close? Just things that karters and parents should keep in mind so to help their track remain in good standing with their insurance. It doesn't have to be 3 things, just stuff we want to leave off on.
Okay. So if there's some stuff to leave off on for basic general stuff, keep your eyes open and look for something stupid. And if something stupid's happening, stop the stupid thing from happening. A lot of it just boils down to that. A lot of it's just common sense. Again, if you see a bunch of kids that are really getting bonkers on pit bikes or some other situation, or there's a situation in the pit area or a parking area, like a divot's out there, like a big divot or, something else that people can wrench a knee in, just bring those things to the attention of the people that own the place. That's important. But mostly it is bringing to attention stupid things, right? Helping the officials, helping the track owner along their way, right? We're all stewards of our sport. And so I think one thing that maybe everybody, if there's one thing that they take from this, it is that this is our sport, right? This isn't like Joe Janowski sitting in some like big place up here and mandating things. Like, I'm at a racetrack. Like, I go to racetracks. You guys go to racetracks. Everybody, all 17 people that watch this go to racetracks, but it's our sport. Each one of us, and we all have a responsibility to watch over it. Not only to grow it, but to be involved in a real and legitimate way, to understand that, the insurance part is just boring as can be. And sometimes you're going to sound like, you're kind of narking on people or things like this, but dumb things are the reason that we're going to end up with a bad insurance situation. So let's stop the dumb things. The way I try to explain it to everybody is like, look, insurance is risky. Okay, racing is risky, and insurance is covering that risk, right? And so our job is to do our very best that we can at these events, the very best we can. And if something happens, that's racing, right? Something bad happened, and we just kind of work our way through that. So we need to work as a group, as a sport, on shoring up all these things. Again, taking the time to make sure your wheels don't come off your go-kart. Okay, that's a real easy one.
Or your weights.
Or your weights, super important. Or your GoPro, or your just as bad as a tire and a weight are the batteries. And so, just for an example, at Stars, so what I did is I came down heavy, and I said, look, I'm making this change in NKA, but it's being applied definitely at Stars, and it counts if you lose a battery, if you lose a weight, you're done for the weekend. And I had guys come up like, well, what if I'm using some tire apps and my battery keeps coming off? And my response was, look, I don't care what you do. If it comes off, then you're parked, right? So I actually had team guys were telling me this, like, and I tell you what, I just said, look, guys, I get it. I understand what you're saying. I know it's hard to keep things on the go-kart. So come up with a way to keep it on. And what was really interesting was I haven't had a problem since.
Was it that big of a problem?
Come off.
For batteries?
Yeah. If you go to races, I think if you really begin to pay attention and you start talking to officials, GoPros, batteries, weights.
Yeah, I see the GoPros all the time.
Yeah, GoPros are all the time. I mean, they're little missiles too. Yeah. I was the guy, hey, I'll take the heat. I'm the reason that you can't put one on top of your head. Okay, so that came from me. The other one is actually, I'm the one who said you can't mount it anywhere in your helmet. And the reason is I know about helmets. And so you can't drill into helmets. It's the dumbest thing ever. And then you can't stick stuff to it, because the next thing you know, so a little GoPro laying there, that's when everybody think about the fact that GoPro, and I get the mounts break. We're going to need to start working on some stuff, because eventually one of those is going to get chucked into, if it hasn't already been, I just haven't heard about it, but they're going to get hit, and they're going to end up in a pit area or something like that, and somebody's going to get hit. And so those are the things we just have to stop, right? So all of the people that are out there, do your part, right? Tighten up your wheels, tighten up your weights, make sure your batteries don't come off. Don't put yourself in dangerous situations on a racetrack, right? Make good moves, have situational awareness. Don't let your kids hit old ladies while they're riding their bikes around riding around the pits. Just do your part, and pick up your trash and take your tires up too, by the way.
Okay, we have a question. We want a rumor cleared up here on Norcal Karters tonight, 9/11. Happening here. Are the delays with the K1 circuit insurance related?
Oh, of course, Howie's going to pop off, right? That's all you got, Howie? Come on, you can do better than that. I don't know. What I have heard is that it's not, but I'm not involved in the K1 thing.
That was my next question.
The only rumor, hey, look, man, the only way I would answer the rumors with another rumor, and so I don't. I love you too, man. You're all right. And by the way, I'm gonna take a second here because Howie popped on. I mentioned earlier, my dad and I went to a kart race and we saw shifters racing, and it was Howie Idelson that was racing in that race. and it was him and some dude. You can pop on here, Howie, and say who it was. But it was Greg Tracy or Gary Tracy, some Tracy, I think, or Brian Tracy. I can't remember the name exactly. And these guys were sick. I mean, this was 1992 or three, right? They had wings on the front. They had DMC stuff on the front. They had full leathers. Like, it was wild. So if you ever want to know, if anybody ever cares, like, why Joe and Don Janowski got so enthralled with shifter karts, it was watching Howie Idelson rip around the Elkhart Grand Prix, 93, I think, 92 or 93.
That was white Nike white suit, wasn't it?
That was way pre. That was so pre that, but that was really cool. So Howie was one of my heroes in the sport, man. So it's always cool to see him still around. Hope he's doing good.
I think he just called you old, Howie.
Well, I mean, he looks a lot younger than I do, so I don't know, man. He's like Alan Rudolph. Like, that guy doesn't age either, right?
Yeah, he's got that
the same age
as
Alan, plus or minus, right? So it's like, I just want to know who does his hair. I could race against that guy. I actually did it once. We were in Oklahoma City in early 2000s or late 90s, and it was like 110 degrees. I think you were probably there, Jason. It was like 110 degrees. It was 190% humidity. Like 14-year-old kids were falling out of their go-karts after the mains. It was so bad, right? Like, I get out, and I was in pretty decent shape at that time. I get out like, oh my God, that's hurting me, man. And I look over and Alan Rudolph takes off his helmet, right? And it's like one of those slow-mo movie deals where, like, the model like shakes their hair, and like, and all, and I'm not an ounce of sweat on the dude. Like, his hair's perfect right out of the thing, and I'm like, he's my other hero. So I mean, you can't beat that, man. When it comes to hair, that guy's got the sport beat.
That's awesome. All right. Well,
that
thanks
was a
for hanging
weekend.
out with us, Joe. Thanks for answering a lot of our questions. If anybody wants to go and look up any of the info that we were talking about, we linked NKA online. And yeah.
So the main thing is, like, look, if you guys are part of a track, if you're looking at doing something down the road, if you are thinking about building a track, I'm heavily involved with a lot of the pre-planning of those kinds of things. What do you need to do? How do you need to design it? And obviously I can take an existing course and we can work with people, or if it's a nice course, you just kind of get it going and into the program. But also for all of you future promoters, track owners, etc., I'm happy to be a resource. All of my staff is happy to be a resource. We're here to just keep the sport of karting kicking ass and taking names. So, use us and abuse us as you see fit. Sport, go for it.
All right.
Well, you definitely gave us a lot of sound clips for Ashley to work on this week with the "Don't let shit fall off your cart."
Yeah, I mean, there should be. I'm probably, there's a kid that works for me, Christian Marsh, and so I tell him I'm going on this, and he's usually like, "Oh God, what's Joe going to say?" It's like, hey, if I'm nothing else, man, I'm authentic, passionate about sport.
Yeah.
And sometimes dumb words come out, but but it is true. I'm really, I've been able to really have a good life within the sport, and I'm trying to leave it better than what I found it. And if I can accomplish that in some way. So happy to be on anytime, by the way. If you guys ever want to drag me back out and talk about something else, not a problem.
Yeah, and it sounds silly, but I've been wanting to do this for a while, just because it's, again, each month I want to highlight something that's off the track we don't think about or we bitch and moan about. It's like, oh, why do we need to do this? Why do we need to do that? And it's like, well, like you said earlier, if you don't have insurance, we don't have tracks. So,
period.
Pretty damn simple.
No question.
Yeah. No question.
Yeah, that's one of those easy binary. That's it. No insurance, no racing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And we don't. I think a lot of times we don't think about it until something happens. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I think what will really happen, by the way, if anybody really wants to know what the really bad thing is, right? The bad thing that comes in is going to be there's one company.
Yeah.
There's almost always going to be somebody that'll write it, right? I mean, somebody's going to step in, but if you think paying $20 now for a pit pass is bad, start thinking a couple $100. right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking not a jump like this, but it would be a jump in an order of magnitude, because now you have one company that's assuming all of the risk in all of karting. And that's a huge risk. So they're going to be properly compensated for it. So that's why. Extra insurance for officials. From a liability perspective, they really don't need it. If you're talking about injuries, really the best thing for track officials is work comp. So if you own a track or you work at a racetrack, or I mean something to that effect, really work comp is kind of like, in that instance, it's the best. It's going to be any sanction. It's going to be any participant accident program that you're going to be able to buy, which is common among all motorsports insurance policies, right? But they're limited. 25,000 is high. You usually see it around 10 or maybe 15. So, so really on that deal, hey, if you've got your own health insurance, that's good. Everybody out there that's racing should have it. And that way you're properly covered, right? Because again, racing insurance is not major medical. But another thing is going to be the work comp, and for any tracks. Oh, dude, please post a pic. It's got to be that driving suit, though,
would
man.
that also qualify as like a corner worker?
Yeah, like track staff, like corner workers and other people, and that's really what got me going on bringing light systems in. I'm not one of those guys who's sitting there going, okay, how can I make more money off I have the same problems producing a program that everybody does. And it's hard to find people that want to be corner workers, right? It's the hardest job that there is at a go-kart track, period. The race director, he gets his butt chewed all the time, but these people show up at 6, 7 in the morning, and they're standing out there all day and under the heat and the rain and the sand nados that you get in Phoenix and everything else. And they're at high risk. And a lot of times they're really people that are available. They're 17 or 18 years old or 19. Maybe they have experience, maybe they don't. They're kind of hard to manage, and so I began using the lights to get rid of that problem. And now, so when I do events and tracks that have lights, what they do is they use the lights to do all of the warning and all the communication. And then once everything is settled down, then you move people onto the racetrack, but there's still lights going, so we've got better coverage. Every year we get 1 or 2 claims from, corner workers that got hurt. And that's a shame. So but yeah, work comp for racetracks is if you have a racetrack or a series or something like that, it's usually not too wild and crazy. And it's the best coverage that you can get for that situation.
You can't leave quite yet.
We have a picture.
We have a picture coming.
Oh, I hope he's found it. I remember there being a big joker on it. Something about a joker.
Let's see.
If it's the one I'm thinking of.
All right. So again, while we wait for the picture, recapping Rockfest West and Corning, both this weekend. Register. Then we got the Prairie City Night Race, Central California Championships, going to be in October.
Oh my God, that's old.
Oh, yeah, we got an oldie but goodie.
Dude, that's Ren Speed. Where is that?
Ren Speed.
Dude, 1987 called it once its Ram Van back. Holy smokes. That's awesome. That's a lot prettier than the leathers he had. Yeah, it's the old Ren Speed stuff, man. I forgot that he was in the Ren Speed. That's cool. I love watching that old stuff.
All
man.
Right.
Teammate was Todd Hayes.
Todd Hayes, that's it. Yeah,
Todd Hayes.
That dude was fast too. I think he was with Oakley. He was with Oakley Sunglasses or something. I talked to him quite a bit for a little while. Hey, can I do a final plug?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Hey, for anybody who wants to see what it is that I do for fun, Stars Championship Series will be from Motorsports Country Club in Cincinnati. And, here in a couple of weeks. And so I don't know if it's cool to be like tuning into Kart Chaser while I'm on, another thing.
Absolutely.
But anyway,
No, yeah.
No, Xander's
Xander's got it.
Yeah, he's
he
helped me out a
helps.
lot in the background. Like he's
He helps
taking
us.
all of my
he helps us
calls and
stuff.
hey,
Okay.
how do I turn
Well, I
my
take all of
computer?
Xander's calls, so that this
Okay.
kind of works. This kind
Yeah.
of works in conjunction. But yeah, so Stars will be on Kart Chaser here in a few weeks. So tune in, check out the kind of crazy stuff that I do. But you'll see lights everywhere, and we try to run a pretty cool format. And anybody that's within the NK system, if you're a track owner or a club operator or whatever, all of you are always invited to come to Stars events and see how I put a program together, which doesn't mean it's the right way. It just means a way. And it'd be great to meet everybody too. So at any rate, unless Howie's got a whole bunch more pictures, I know he does. So, but thanks for letting me plug that, by the way.
Oh no problem at all. And again, yeah, I know some of the outlets like shying away from mentioning other ones. I don't care, but yeah, Xander literally told me how to turn on a computer. So
yeah, there's a little too much of that in the sport. So I think we're all on the same boat, man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm just trying to get people in. That's all I care about.
Just get people racing.
Xander had to tell Jason, you have to push go live.
To go live.
To go live.
Oh, it's funny. Hey, I want to just to razz Xander. See, I take credit for getting Xander in the broadcasting game because we were doing that esports deal over COVID. And so we came up with this idea to do Beat the Boss, right? Which was just dumb. We were all bored, right?
Yeah.
It was like, I don't know, whatever it was, April or something like that. And so I'm like, yeah, that's cool. And then, so I called up Xander and I'm like, hey, man, because I knew he did iRacing stuff too. And I'm like, hey, could you figure out a broadcast for this thing? He's like, oh, yeah, I could probably figure something out. And then we ended up having, through a friend, Robert Kubica ends up coming on. There's a bunch of good kart racers came in, and Robert Kubica's in there. And it was wild, right? So it was kind of like, and then we started a series. We did a series for a little bit. And, Xander was part of all that too. So, I try to, I'm trying to take all the credit that I don't deserve. But he does a great thing for the sport. And he's another one of those people who just wants to see it keep getting bigger if we can. Yeah. And so I applaud all of his efforts. I applaud all your guys' efforts. So really cool that you guys do this. And like I said, happy to be on anytime.
We definitely appreciate it. Are you going to close this out, Ashley?
Yes. So that tonight we were joined by Joe and Jason, and we talked all about insurance. We will be again at Karting and Rockfest West, all the things we mentioned earlier. We are 154 people away from our 1,000 subscriber goal. Jason will shave his head on the broadcast, so let's make it happen. Also, I am going to end the show kind of on a sad note, but I want everybody to remember that Norcal Karters has suicide resources on our website. I want everybody to text and check in on your friends. There's a lot of racing going on right now, and a lot of us are busy, but you never really know what anybody's going through. Send a text. Norcal Karters, we have suicide resources. Share it. Everybody check on your friends, you guys. It's something we all need to do because you don't want to miss somebody. All right, so have a great weekend. We'll see everybody in Corning and in Sonoma. So have a good night.